Hello, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Eme, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this next segment in our study of the spiritual disciplines. And I will be taking you on the topic of fasting. I have decided to reward it as fasting beyond food and water. And I'm very excited, even as going to be sharing this next few minutes with you. But I also look forward to the live class where we'll be having discussions and where you'll be able to ask your questions. I'm really looking forward to taking your questions and really answering. Now, let me tell you a story. Let me start by telling a story. I began studying the subject of fasting about 15 years ago, and it all started with this drink. A bottle of Malta Guinness. It's a very popular drink area where I currently reside. And so this is how the story goes. We were traveling, it was a road trip. Some of us on staff with other disciples, we are going for a funeral up country, and it was in January. I can't remember the year, but it's like 15 years ago. So in January in the church in Lagos, we usually declare 40 days of fasting. We began doing that maybe 18, 19 years ago. Maybe 12 years ago, actually. So on this fateful day, we were traveling up country, and we are supposed to be fasting that period. So while we are in the vehicle moving, one of the staff members there, pulled out a nice chilled bottle of malt. He opened it and began to drink, and I looked over and I asked, "Hey, bro, are we not supposed to be fasting?" And the guy said, "Sure, we're supposed to be fasting, but this is not food I'm eating. This is just liquid that I'm taking." So I began, that was actually how this inquiry into this subject was born. I said, let me go study it out. So I'm going to be sharing a few things with us, today, and to help us to get to know. So why are we exploring the subject of fasting? Because when you look at the spiritual discipline, no matter who is listing them out, fasting always comes up. It makes the list of all the spiritual discipline. And number two, it is maybe the most controversial, of all the spiritual discipline. And also, of course, it's also the least practiced. And I'm going to be proving this to us as we go along. So my class will go like this. I'm going to have an introduction. In this class, we'll talk about what fasting is. Then we'll see an overview of the use of fasting throughout the Bible. Then we'll look at the use and teaching of fasting in the ministry of Jesus. Then we'll focus on special passages and controversies. Then I'm going to have the conclusion. Now, if you are studying a book like this, there's an easy way to actually do a word study. And all you need to do is just to look out for every passage in the Bible that actually talks about this. That's how to make the words. For example, in doing this study, I looked out for you need a concordance. Okay, you need a concordance, your Bible, you need a dictionary, and I began looking up for every mention of the word fast in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I looked up every passage that mentions eat or ate, fast with plural, food, fasting, hunger, fasted as in past tense, and everything. So we're going to look at historical context. We'll look at textual linguistic criticism. In this case, we'll look at the cultural context on fasting, and we'll look at religious context also. Then scholarly inquiries. Then what makes sense, common sense. So this had to carry out an exegesis of a particular passage in the Bible. Of course, the opposite of exegesis is eisegesis. So exegesis is to draw meaning out of a text. Eisegesis is to read meaning into a text that was not originally there. So if you are ready, now let me do some introduction. I'm going to be quoting someone that you already know, Richard Foster. I'm sure you are reading the book right now on spiritual discipline. It's a classic. Here's what Richard has got to say. He said, they are not classical merely because they are ancient, talking about fasting and the spiritual discipline in general. They are not classical merely because they are ancient, although they have been practiced by sincere people over the centuries. The disciplines, this is all we're talking about. Disciplines are classical because they are central to the experiential Christianity. So it's very, very important, all this discipline. Just like you want to stay in shape, you want to build muscles, you go to the gym, you go work out, you can lift some weights and everything. So also for you to be healthy spiritually, you need some set of disciplines that So in one form or another, all the devotional masters have affirmed the necessity of this discipline. So they are very important if we are to grow in our Christian life. Now, how many are they? I'm sure by now that question must have been answered. Whether it's Rolheiser's, he called it the non-negotiable 3. He brought out just 3, and or you want to look at Steve Kinnard, our brother Steve Kinnard, who is also teaching in this series, and Richard Foster. They have their 12, even though they don't. Richard's Steve Kinnard's 12 and Foster's 12 are not the same. Okay, but they are total 12. Or Wilders, Dallas Wilders 17. So no matter which number, whether you say there are only 3 disciplines or 12 disciplines or 17 disciplines, fasting always comes up, and that is why fasting is very, very important. Now let me go back to Foster. That I love some of these things. So how do we fast? How to? Unfortunately, okay, before I jump into that, according to Foster, I said the Bible called people to such disciplines as fasting, was one fasting, prayer, worship, and celebration, but never gave almost no instruction about how to do them. There's almost no instruction on how to do them. Now, of course, if you go to the New Testament, Jesus' disciple asked him, teach us how to pray. But in most part of the Bible, we don't know, we're not taught how to pray. It's like those disciplines were so frequently practiced and such a part of the general culture that the how it's done was common knowledge. For example, amongst young people today, teenagers, you don't have to explain how to go on the internet. We just assume that everybody knows how to go on the internet. We assume that everybody knows how to make a call on the phone. So you don't go teaching people this is what you do, this is how you punch your numbers or anything. So from Richard Foster, let's look at what our brother Steve Kinnard has to say about fasting. I really love what he said. They say fasting is different from the other spiritual disciplines. Okay, this is why fasting is way different from other spiritual disciplines. For example, look at the flesh doesn't push back when we study a Bible. The flesh really doesn't push back. When we study the Bible, when we don't experience physical discomforts, we don't get hungry or thirsty. We don't experience a drop in our blood sugar, for example, when we pray. We don't get headache when we drop a check in the contribution plate on Sunday. We don't feel physical fatigue. Our muscles don't ache when we share our faith. But when it comes to fasting, we feel physical discomfort. So fasting is very unique because it actually stretches us. Beyond praying, Bible study, evangelism, fasting does something because it has to do with food. It has to do with food. Now, think about it. For us to define what fasting is, I always do what I call the clarification by definition. What is fasting? Now, for you to do this, you have to go into the original meaning, the etymology of that word. The word fast, okay, sumi or sum, tisum, not the T is silent, just sum. It's strictly to keep your mouth shut. That's what it means. It is the act of going drink voluntarily. Okay, so I want you to take note of that word voluntarily. So it is not every time that you don't eat that is called fasting, but this was deliberately you're not fasting for a reason, generally for religious purposes. Now I'm going to be sharing with you different kinds of fasting, fasts today. So you see that true biblical fast has to do with a religious purpose, really. So it is deliberate and sustained, abstinence from all form of specific of food for a specific period of time. So when you deliberately abstain from food for a particular period of time for a specific reason, that's fasting. Number 3 is fasting, however, could also be done for other reasons. For example, it was sometimes done as a sign of distress. Of course, when you are distressed, when you lose someone or you in a very intense situation, people don't remember to eat, or they stop eating in distress, in grief, or as a sign of repentance also. Now, I pretty much like what this scholar from Ghana says, that biblical fasting is a decision to suffer hunger while you devote yourself to prayer, to bow down your soul before God, that He may intervene on your behalf. So it is when you do that deliberately, to bow down your soul before God, so that He may come to your rescue. Let us see what Ken says. He said the principal Hebrew term for fasting is the root. That's the Hebrew word there. He said the verse of this verb occurs about 21 times in the Hebrew Bible, all in that stem. And basically what he's saying there is that both the verb and the noun, here I'm reading this highlighted portion, both the verb and the noun form refers exclusively to abstaining from food and possibly drink. So from food and drink, which corresponds to what I said earlier. So why do we fast is what we're going to be answering shortly. So I have these quotes that I wanted to just share with us, and because it really helps us to see what various scholars from various religious background has got to say about this. From our friend here, Brongas, he said, as a matter of fact, fasting is by no means an Israelite monopoly. In other words, it's not just something that was invented by the Israelites or practiced only by the Israelites. He says, from earliest antiquity, people scattered all over the world have, for one reason or another, abstained themselves from food and drink for a shorter or longer time as individuals or as a community. So it's something that has been practiced for many centuries. So it's not something new. Fasting is not new at all. Now, talking about exegesis, to understand this word, so I looked up up the meaning of where the Bible talks about eat, fast, fasting, hunger, and every single thing. So you have to look at how the word is used in the Bible, because it has got to do with something that all of us care about, and that is food. Okay, so many custom, purely secular in origin. Today, you see the law of custom that are, purely secular. They are now gradually having, or they are obtaining a religious significance. Just as things that are purely religious are custom have disassociated from religion. For example, today you hear about things like intermittent fasting. People do it maybe for health reasons, maybe to lose weight. It has nothing to do with religious roots, and also some things with religious roots have given up that essence to become secular. Secular things are becoming used more religious ways. So we are going to continue in our quest in this thing as we begin to answer this question. So why do people fast? People who fast, so if from what I'm saying from the Bible, people fast for various reasons at various times. For example, Anna, she fasted because she was distressed. She wanted a child. It was like, I need a child, I would die. Sometimes people when they're at war, they actually fast, and every single thing. So when they are heavily distressed, you see that they fast, they stop eating, they refuse food. So fasting originally is a natural expression of grief. For example, when somebody is grieving the loss of a loved one, like David, they will just stop eating. And if you have gone through some very intense situation, maybe you failed an exam, a major exam in school, or something major happened to you, maybe you even lose a girlfriend, maybe your girlfriend passes on or leaves you, people will begin to sulk and they stop eating. So it's not every time that people abstain from food, which we're going to be looking at, really practically means that they are fasting. So people fast for various reasons in the Bible. When they are distressed, they fast. When they are afraid, they fast. When they need help, they fast. John's disciples, for example, they fasted and prayed, but Jesus' disciples were not fasting and praying the way those guys will fast. And Jesus made it very clear that because the bridegroom was already there was no need for them to fast. So there are several examples you can look through, people that fasted, and the reason which day they fasted, and you're able to see it's very, very easy to actually do that assignment. So why do they fast is the next thing we'll be looking at, shortly. Hang in there. So we have already agreed and said that in the Bible, people fasted for various, reasons. When they are grieving, when they lost a loved one died, and even in case of war, if you look at Judges chapter 20 verse 26 or Second Chronicles chapter 20 verse 3, case of war, in the case of pestilence, fasting has also become a recognized mode of seeking divine favor and protection. So if you look at the Bible, people, when they want something from God and they really want to catch God's attention, not that God looks away, they'll go ahead and fast. And it was also natural that it should be associated with confession of sin. If you look at the Bible, you'll find people, when they are fasting, they're also confessing, their sins. So that is very, very, important. So now we look at the legal fasts in the Bible. Now it will interest us again to know that the only fast that was commanded by the law, when I say the law, I mean the Old Testament, is found in Leviticus 16 and Leviticus 23 and Numbers 29. And this is the Great Day of Atonement. That's the only fast that was commanded for the Israelite. The rest people did it voluntarily. And of course, it does look like it was carried over to the New Testament period. When we read the book of Acts chapter 27, when Paul said, on that day was the day of the fast, which is the day of atonement. That's a Yom Kippur. So there was only one fast that was commanded by the Bible. So at what point did fasting, all these different kind of fasting, become institutionalized in our society? Of course, the biblical time. So the fast of the fourth month, a time came that the Israelites began to fast for several reasons, especially to commemorate. So this fast was kept on the 17th day of Tammuz. So they had the fast of the fourth month, they had the fast of the fifth month, they had the fast of the seventh month, and they began to do all these things for a particular reason. They also had the fast of the 10th month, and of course the fast of Esther. Remember that's fast that Esther instituted herself and her maids and everything before she went to go and see the king. So of course the Israelites were saved at that point. And after a while, to commemorate that great deliverance that the Israelites enjoyed, people began to fast on that day, just like Queen Esther her fasting. But there's something I would like to warn all of us. You can't make somebody's fast yours and expect to get the blessing that the original person has received. So that's that's kind of a warning for us as disciples. So fasting became institutionalized in Zechariah, for example. Simply distinguishes the fast by the month which they were observing. The Israelites were asking, but we're fasting for all these years, we are fasting, and God said, kind of is that what I really want from you? In Zechariah chapter 8 verse 19, he said, this is what the Lord Almighty says: the fast of the 4th, the 5th, the 7th, and the 10th month, it will become joyful and glad occasions and happy festival for Judah. Therefore, love truth and peace. What God said, listen, this is what I want. And you see that's happening all over and again in the Bible. Go beyond the fasting, beyond that motivation of our body and mortifying of our body. God actually wants us to focus on righteousness. So we have the fast of the 4th month, and this was kept on the 17th of Tammuz to commemorate the making of the golden calf. Will you believe that? The making of the golden calf by the Jews in the desert. So they remember what the Jews have done. So they instituted a fast just to remember that sin. Of course, the fast of the 5th month was kept on the 9th of Ab, to commemorate the decree that those who had left Egypt should not enter Canaan. So all those things we are to commemorate there. Of course, you have the fast of the 7th month. What was it for? Was to commemorate the complete sack of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. So when they remember that, what happened when Nebuchadnezzar came to sack whatever day, to commemorate that, that day, that event, they did a fast. Of course, the fast of the 10th month of the Tibet was to commemorate the receiving by Ezekiel and the other captive in Babylon of the news of destruction of Jerusalem. So when they heard that Jerusalem was destroyed, you can see all this we were to invoke a sense of loss and to really come before God. of course, talked about the fast of Esther, where the Israelites were spared. Now, so the next question is, so when did people fast? People in the Old Testament era, they fasted at various times, like we said, for various reasons, in times of war, threats of war, when loved one is sick, when their loved one dies, when they are seeking God's forgiveness, like David and some other people, when they are faced with impending danger, they go humble themselves to fast, just like Israel, when they were traveling back to Jerusalem, and he knew that it was going to be a very, very risky journey, so he declared a fast. And and of course, finally, fast was used to commemorate certain occasions in the Old Testament. Now, sometimes God has frowned at the fasting of people, and the most vocal scripture there is Isaiah 58. When the prophet Isaiah just lashed and said, "This is not the fast that I want." So when this fast becomes a show, when it's no longer drawing people's heart to God, God always calls the prophet to go talk to the Israelites. So God said, "Listen, I don't just want you to just starve, I want you to lose the bonds of wickedness that you have. I want you to undo the heavy. I want to shelter the poor. I want to clothe the naked." God said, "This is the kind of fasting I want. If you want to humble yourself, then do it this way." Because a lot of times, sometimes people have this outward appearance of piety, but they are not really, their hearts are far from God. Now, next question is, so how long should a fast last? Now, it will also interest you in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel 14. Usually for a day, the Israelites were called just to fast for just one day. Sometimes it's for a night, like Daniel chapter 6, verse 18. The very first time we start saying 3 complete days of fasting was Esther, in the book of Esther chapter 4, verse 16, where she said, "I'm going to go to the king. If I die, I die." Then of course we have the 40-day fast, which was an extraordinary one, done by just 3 people in the Bible: Moses, Moses and Elijah, Elijah, and of course Jesus. Of course, that was a miraculous. Something you cannot really stay without drinking water for that long and be alive. So I think that was miraculously, assisted by God. Of course, in Nineveh, you see animals fasted. The king, was so struck by what the reluctant prophet, Jonah said that he even forbade the animals from eating, and of course, you will see fasting in the Apocrypha, time. They fasted a time of national, danger, the book of Judith and thereabout. So fasting has been an age-long thing. In the New Testament, after this blinding vision that Paul had, he didn't eat, so we want to assume there was fasting. And Ananias said, "Okay, you can now rise up," and Bible says he rose up and he ate, was able to eat, something. So remember when Jesus' disciples tried to cast out the demons, and Jesus told them, "This cannot come out unless with fasting and prayer." Now that is interesting, which we're going to be looking at that one, soon. Now, here is what I think. As a young Christian, I don't know the part of the world that you live in. In my part of the world, it is not. It is common to have people not eat for a whole day, not because they are fasting, but because they can't afford to. I remember as a college student, sometimes we're so busy, and sometimes it's not because I can't afford to, but we're so busy, working, reading, doing assignments, that we don't remember to eat. I remember there was a time as a young Christian, and maybe it happened to you also, where you are like, "Oops, it's almost 3 or 2, I'm not eating." Then you try to convert it into a fast. How many of you have done that? Put up your hand. That's not really the fasting the Bible, So a careful reading of the passage like 2 Corinthians 11, 23 or so reveals otherwise. That is not what fasting is. There is something called abstinence, which you can't actually abstain. And so in the New Testament, we looked at fasting. You can go ahead and read some of this. I'm going to give you my slides. You can go ahead and read some of these things, the fast and everything. So there are several accounts of people fasting in the gospel. Anna, it was, Bible says she never left the temple. She was fasting day and night. Now, literally, not because she never left, but like she was always in the temple. That's how we speak anyway. That's how we talk. John the Baptist, his disciples came, and they were fasting and everything. And Jesus fasted for 40 days. So there are lots of examples in the New Testament about people, including Jesus Christ, fasting. Cornelius in Acts 10 was fasting. The church in Antioch fasted when they were going to send off Paul and Barnabas out on their missionary journey. And Paul and Barnabas also prayed with fasting, before the appointed elders, as we read in Acts chapter 14. Now, Paul also fasted after the blinding vision, like we said. And now you can argue, was he just fasting or did he just refuse to eat? More likely that he was fasting because of his sin, because of the realization that he was wrong, trying to squash the church, thinking he was serving God, but only to find out that he was actually fighting against God. And so before missionary trips are carried out, we read that the Bible said that the people fasted. Now, when Paul was in this squall on the wave, when the wave was hitting, Bible said they didn't eat. Now we're going to talk about that. Was that fasting or that they didn't eat? They were so distressed that they didn't eat. It was not necessarily a fast, to actually be religious with a religious undertone. Now, I want us to look at some special passages at this time, even as I'm trying to wind down. Like I said, I really want to have the live discussion with you. So after watching this video, I'd like to have a live discussion with you. Now, when abstinence from food is not biblical fasting, I mentioned, when you don't eat because you're too busy or because you are distracted. Sometimes the Bible calls us to abstain from certain things. Some believe that Paul at that time and his fellow sailors, they fasted for 14 days. But on the contrary, I don't believe that. I just felt that they were so distressed that they didn't eat. And so you can go and read it up yourself, and maybe you might find a more suitable interpretation to that. So let's go to controversies. And just like we have cited, biblical fasting is abstinence from food and water, only from food and water. Now, I'm saying this because in our day, I've had disciples say, "Oh, I'm fasting from TV, I'm fasting from movies, I'm fasting from using my cell phone, I'm fasting from," one brother said, "I'm fasting for sugar. I will not drink Coke until was it his mother-in-law or somebody, until a relative becomes a disciple." Now, that is not biblical fasting. Really, that's basically abstinence, and the Bible indeed encourages us to actually abstain. For example, in 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 11, Peter writes, "Dear friends, I urge you as aliens and strangers in this world to abstain from sinful desires which war against your soul." So as Christians, we are already called to abstain from sinful desire. So there's some things I will not do because I'm a Christian, and so if I don't eat a particular kind of food, for example, that is not good for me, I won't say I'm fasting from that food. So let's have that at the back of our mind. So there's a distinction between hunger strike and fasting. Sometimes people go on hunger strike for a political reason. That is not biblical fast. You can say, "I'm not going to eat because I'm upset." I hope you don't do that at home. If you are sleeping with your parents, or if you are a married person, you won't say, I won't eat my wife's food, or I won't eat at home because I'm having attitude. That is not biblical fast. That's just you punishing yourself for a worldly reason. Now, it is also distinct from health-based diet. For example, sometimes you are asked not to eat some particular food for health reason. That is not biblical fasting. So biblical fasting always centers on spiritual purposes. So that is one of the things that distinguish biblical fasting from all kinds of fasting. It's for spiritual purpose, not for health reason or for any other thing. It's for spiritual purpose. Now, we look at King Darius in Daniel chapter 6 verse 18. He lost appetite because he was troubled. So that is not fasting. He just lost appetite to eat. Nehemiah, in his modesty, he refused to the lush food that was supposed to be for the governor, which he was actually. He refused that food assigned to him as a governor in Nehemiah chapter 5 verse 14. That is not fasting. That's simply just abstaining for ethical reason. Daniel and his friends, they restricted the diets that they would take. They say, "Give us just vegetables and we're going to be fine. So that is not to say they had vegetable fasting. So I suspect that this restriction to take just fruits must be responsible for the so-called fruit fast. That's from my research. So and okay, so in the Bible there is no evidence of anything called fruit fast in the Bible, and there's no television fast, there's no Coca-Cola fast, there's no hamburger fast, or okay, like I won't eat hamburger for 1 year, but you're going to eat all kinds of food and you call it a fast. That is not just what that is. That's not what the Bible said. In Leviticus chapter 7, 11, and 14, the Israelites were restricted from eating certain animals and for some health reasons and everything, cultural reasons, ceremonial reasons, but it was never called a fast. Now, let me go back to where I started. Remember the picture I showed you initially that actually stimulated my study in this great topic. Was the picture of that food. Okay, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag right now. Is this drink? Remember the story I told you about our road trip, and we are all fasting, and the disciple was just popping it. I think it was on the second bottle or can that this brother opened, that I now began to question him. I said, hey, bro, are you not supposed to be fasting? Because I thought maybe he was not fasting. And he said, sure, he was fasting. I said, but I've been watching you drinking malt. And he said, no, this is liquid. That to him, fasting is only when you eat solid food. So let's look at what this Malta Guinness entails. And what I'm reading out right now is exactly what is written at the wrapper. It's a non-alcoholic adult premium soft drink. This is the advertisement. It said full of vitalizing goodness with added vitamins, mineral, and low burning sugar for longer lasting energy that fuels your greatness. So you can imagine this thing already has everything you need, to survive hunger or to survive, as a person. So here it is a non-alcoholic adult premium soft drink. It is wholesome nourishment from, finest natural ingredients, full of vitalizing goodness with added vitamins, mineral, slow burning sugar, everything. So the question is, how do you define food? How do you define food? Is food something like when you eat like a burger or spaghetti, but when you drink malt, it's not food. Now, food is not the nature of what you eat, but the content of what you eat. Food is for nourishment, and by the time you look at the back of the wrapper, this is the contents of that. It contains carbonated water, sugar, maize, barley malt extract 10%, sorghum malt about 2%. It has coloring of obviously herbs, stabilizer, everything. For energy, it provides you 272 of energy. So that's about 64 and it also has protein 0.3 grams of protein, carbohydrates, of which sugar 16 grams of carbohydrates, and also have about 13 grams and fat and everything. So it is called a food drink. So what this thing is a food drink. So food can come in maybe 3 states. Food can be solid, food can be semi-liquid, that's pap, or food can be entirely liquid. Okay, food can be solid, semi-liquid, which is pap, or entirely liquid. So whichever the structure is, it is to nourish your body. So I want you to remember that. So often biblical fasts are usually for 1 day, like we said, and from what time to what time? From sun up to sundown, like we see in Jude chapter 20 verse 26, 1 Samuel chapter 14 verse 28. So what about people who live at the Arctic Circle, that have just very few hours of daylight? Well, you might not count sundown. You won't use the sun. You might just use the hours to actually count. So 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is usually the amount of time fasting goes. Now, there's some warning concerning fasting. So fasting can easily turn into an external show and a ceremonial, ritualism. So when he did, the prophet always spoke out against it, like we saw in Isaiah, 58 from verse 1 to 14. He said, Bible says you cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Sometimes we just want to fast, but people are fasting. The question is, are you sincere? Are you honest with what you are doing? So I want to tackle a certain controversy. And this is especially true for those who are married. And if you're not married, there's something you can learn, of course. And that is from 1 Corinthians 7. Now, why am I saying this? Many years ago, as a young church leader in a place, and I was talking to a young couple, and the brother said that he will not be physical with his wife because he was fasting. And I said, where did you get that from? And he showed me this passage. So I had to go study the passage, and this is what I discovered from that passage. Now, another way to actually do a good exercise is to read a particular passage. If it's a naughty one, as in a KNO, difficult to read it in various Bible translations. So what I've done is to look at this translation in the King James Version, the New King James Version, the Western, the Young Literal Translation. And this is what he says in the King James Version. He said, defraud ye, not one of the other, except it be for consent for a time, that ye may give yourself to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempts you not for your so I'm thinking about the NIV, and I'm reading the King Version. In other words, don't deprive one another. The Bible says, the New King Version said, do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, if you look at that, said in Webster Dictionary, it says, that ye give yourself to fasting and prayer, and that ye be free for fasting and prayer. Now, what I found out that fasting and prayer was not actually what the original translation says. Now, here are the popular translations that added fasting to it, that added fasting. Most translations today do not have fasting. So, of course, people who have been used to King James Version will favor this. Now, what you need to do when you get to this part is to look for a Bible translation that will give you both the Greek and the English side by side, and that's what what I've done basically there. So, if you take a look at it here, you will see that there is no fasting there. There is no fasting there, and this is the new exhaustive strong numbering that that is 9999, and so it was inserted. There's an inserted word there. So this word was added by translators for better readability in the English. So there is no actual word in the Greek text. That word does not in the Greek text. The word may be displayed in italics or in parentheses in other bracket. So the word fasting was added there. So people who are struggling, who are wondering, how true is this? Well, I've given you the answer. I went through about 8 translations that have something different from what that translation says. So this is what it says. Clearly, the controversy in that 1 Corinthians 7:4 said, the wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer. That's what it says. Then come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you wherever. So where did the fast come? It's actually some traditions, that actually brought that one in. So let's be mindful of what we believe or how we practice fasting, because sometimes it can become human tradition, and that is what makes fasting so unattractive today in our religious world, because there's so much human tradition that's coming in, so much legality and legalism legalism, actually not legalism that's coming in, that's making it not to be attractive. So it becomes a motivation of the body. So sometimes people just suffer themselves, but they're not actually getting the benefit that the Bible wants. I'm going to end here before we take our Q&A from what Richard Foster says. He said, what will account for this almost total disregard for a subject so frequently mentioned in scripture and so ardently practiced by Christians through the centuries? Two things he said. First, fasting has developed a bad reputation as a result of the excessive exotic practices of the Middle Ages. Now, with the decline of inward reality of the Christian faith, an increasing tendency to stress only the things that are left. What is it? The outward form developed. So that since people are not doing well in spiritual life, they are not going to focus on the external side of fasting, so which is about mortification of the body. And whenever there is there is a form devoid of spiritual power, the law will take over, because the law always carries it in the sense of security and manipulative power. Hence, fasting was subjected to the most most rigid regulations and practice with extreme self mortification and flagellation, that is beating yourself and putting bruises on yourself. So modern culture reacts strongly to these excesses and tends to confuse fasting with mortification. Was just punishment. So fasting helps. It's about beating your body. It's about suffering the body, so that you can focus for that time on God and God alone. So this how far we can go. It's about 40 minutes right now. I just want to stop at this time. Sorry, I'm kind of rushing it and everything. And I bid you greetings. I'm actually doing this recording in my hotel room in Tel Aviv, in Israel, where we have come for the biblical study tour. So I look forward to being with you guys next week as we discuss your questions, and I hope you will have enjoyed listening to my video. So we're going to take the Q&A at this time as we wrap up on fasting beyond food and water. God bless you all, as I look forward to see you guys live for the Q&A section. Bye for now.